Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to remind you each and every day, it expands our base. Donald Trump has made his choice, the most significant nomination that he will make in this campaign. And that is J.D. Vance to be the running mate, the candidate for vice president of the Republican Party. J.D. Vance is 39 years old, relatively new to the United States Senate in his first term. He is a freshman, but he is someone who has made a reputation for himself. And we'll talk about that. But first, what was the reason for J.D. Vance's nomination? First of all, his relationship with Donald Trump Jr. They are close friends, and Donald Trump Jr. promoted the whole idea of J.D. Vance. In addition, J.D. Vance is young, he is dynamic, and he is a Trump backer, but he didn't start out that way. Let's remind you that J.D. Vance, in an interview with Charlie Rose, while promoting his best-selling, New York Times best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy, called himself a never Trump guy. And, important to note, he said of the soon-to-be president, "I never liked him." In fact, he compared Donald Trump to Hitler. Interesting. But he went on to say that he decided to support Trump because he believed in Trump's positions. Vance originally said he didn't vote for Trump in 2016, and his former roommate shared images of a text message Vance sent from him that year in which he called Trump cynical and said he could be, and I repeat this, America's Hitler. But by the time Vance launched his campaign for the United States Senate in 2021, his views were changing and his alliance shifted to Donald Trump. He met with the former president and quickly won his endorsement. Vance has said he was wrong about Trump. In an interview this month on Fox News, he was asked to explain his past criticism, and this is what he said. "I didn't think he was going to be a good president. He was a great president, and it's one of the reasons why I am working so hard to make sure that he gets a second term." It's a fascinating turn of events, and most assuredly, what he said about Donald Trump will be repeated by many during the course of this campaign. But what is important to note is that they are in complete sync on most major issues. Let me point out that J.D. Vance is a man who says that Donald Trump won the election of 2020. He has been a leading election denier, and Donald Trump loves that. In addition, J.D. Vance is absolutely opposed to a woman's right to choose, one of the leading anti-abortion advocates in the United States Senate. Number three, and this is very interesting, he absolutely opposed aid to Ukraine, which makes him questionable by a lot of people, particularly in the Republican and foreign policy establishment. He is an attractive candidate. He is well-spoken, he is sharp, and one can only speculate about what a debate between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris would look like. Tell you, everybody in America will be watching that. And so we now know the direction that Donald Trump is taking. I watched the first night of the Republican National Convention, which opened with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was deeply disturbing. And of course, there were other speakers who reflected the attitude that Donald Trump is the man, the savior for the United States of America. It was almost messianic, and that to me is also a very interesting turn in terms of the Republican Party. But we now know that in addition to everything else, Donald Trump has set J.D. Vance up for a long political career. First of all, if they lose the election, Vance will stay in the United States Senate. Secondly, if they win the election, he will be a vice president under a president who cannot run for another term, which automatically catapults him into the seat of potential nomination in 4 years. Interesting, we're already talking about 4 years from now. Interesting development. I must also point out that J.D. Vance is a brilliant fellow, graduate of Yale Law School. That's where he met his wife. They lived in San Francisco or in the Bay Area for a while. He was active in Silicon Valley. And all I can say is it is the right choice if you're looking for a generational shift in the Republican Party. What do I mean by that? Donald Trump is 78 years old. J.D. Vance is, as you all now know, not even 40. And that makes a huge difference in terms of his trajectory. Remember that it was Richard Nixon who was nominated at the same age for vice president, 39, and who then had a political career which spanned decades. J.D. Vance may be looking at exactly the same trajectory in his political life. So we better get used to J.D. Vance, who he is, what he stands for. And it makes the vice presidency even more important. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The American people don't vote for a vice president. They vote for a president. But in this campaign, because of the age of both candidates for president, the question of who is vice president will matter very, very much. So we're going to watch J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. We will hear from both of them on Thursday night, the last night of the convention. At least my understanding is that J.D. Vance will speak on Thursday, although they could change that as well. And Donald Trump, however, is for sure on Thursday night. Donald Trump's reception at the Republican National Convention was rapturous, and there's no doubt that the reason, in part, was not just because they nominated the man who they really wanted, but because of the near-death experience, which we all witnessed last Saturday. What does this mean for America? A clear choice. A choice between a Republican ticket, clearly defined, and what we expect will be the Democratic ticket of Biden and Harris. Let me end this particular podcast by pointing out that as soon as the Republican convention is over, I expect there will be a move again to have Biden step down and turn everything over to Harris. Will it happen? Good question. It'll be a lot for us to talk about in the days ahead. But in the meantime, the ticket is now Trump and J.D. Vance. Trump and Vance. Maybe one could say Trump will advance all the way to the White House. Theoretically, possible. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. You can interact with me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Happy to hear from you. And my special appreciation to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program, who makes sure that you hear what we are saying and doing. And to all of you who will watch the convention tonight, see how American politics progresses, and frankly, I can't wait. See you tomorrow, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman.